Today we shall deal with the atheism of the Big Bang cosmology. You may kindly recollect those points which we discussed in the last session. Big Bang and theism, Big Bang and God, especially Big Bang and the scriptural appropriation, mostly from the Christian biblical point of view. That was the point of our discussion on last Friday. Today, we will look at Big Bang from the atheistic point of view. For that, let me present my PowerPoint to share my PowerPoint with you. Atheism is all the more challenging. It is very comfortable to be with the theistic group. And there are several scientists, philosophers arguing for atheism from the Big Bang point of view itself. Although Big Bang sounds much like a creation, as Mark William Worthing has been arguing in the last session. But more than that, there are this also, as science religion scholars, we should be familiar with the Big Bang atheism, basically. John Templeton Foundation asked this question to some of the top scientists in the world, I think in 2012. What was this question? Does the universe have a purpose? That was the question. To some of the top astronomers, physicists, and cosmologists. See what the response of the people had been. Nearly 3 of them said absolutely no. And a couple of them are a bit doubtful without a definitive response. And however, the majority of them are in favor of the universe having a purpose. So the universe having a purpose or having a creator, given from the point of view of the origin of the universe, we had discussed already. So today let us deal with the arguments of those who think that the universe doesn't require a creator God, or it has no purpose. Then we will be picking up 3 of them one by one. And then another hardcore atheist from physics and cosmology, Stephen Hawking, the renowned physicist you are familiar with. I will introduce his idea also with briefly. See, these are the leading arguments. There are inherent epistemic limits to every system. We have been arguing from the Big Bang for God that given the explanatory gaps in Big Bang theory, we must invoke an external agency. But atheistically oriented scientists and philosophers are arguing back, saying that every system has got its own constraints and limitations. Human system also is subject to this principle. Say, for example, we humans perceive only the visible light out of the 7 colors in light. Similarly, there are so many things which you are not able to know about the origins of the universe. That doesn't mean that there should be a creator God. The postulation of the divine is due to the limits of human perception. Perception boundary will be enhanced through instruments as we advance, as science advances. And when the perception boundary is enhanced further, everything can be explained consistently by science. So the present limitations, explanatory limitations of the Big Bang is on account of our perceptual limitations, our systemic constraints. That doesn't mean that science will not be able to explain Big Bang ultimately without reference to a metaphysical principle. That is one argument. Because as science advances, this will be fixed. Now, I would very much have loved to solicit your feedback on this thing, but for about want of time and not initiating a discussion as such now, which we can do at the end. I also wish to give my own responses to these arguments in favor of atheism in order to give you some light, and certainly you will have your own reflections and responses creatively and rationally for each of these arguments. Firstly, we need to know that when atheists make this claim that as science advances, the explanatory gaps will be filled up. It means the image of God presupposed therein is the idea of a God of the gaps. This God of the gaps comes from Newton. Newton endorsed a sort of God of the gaps. That is to say, wherever science is not able to explain anything, we should invoke God. But we should know that as science advances, the God of the gaps is filled up. It fills up the gaps. Then God of the gap is eliminated. But we should also know that as science advances more and more, as more and more gaps are filled up, newer and newer gaps are opened up also. Mysteries are only rendered all the more opaque and incomprehensible as a result of the development of science. Scientific developments do not necessarily, history of science tells us that research, experimental developments or scientific discoveries do not consume or exhaust the mystery dimension in science. Rather, the mystery dimensions is only enhanced by scientific research. So, the God of the gaps can be eliminated by filling the science, filling the gaps. That is the theistic argument. The presupposition there is that Big Bang assumes a God of the gaps. In fact, the idea of God that Big Bang implies is much more than a God of the gaps. Okay, it is not in the gaps or in the ignorance that we encounter God in Big Bang. Rather, it is in the wonder and marvels of knowledge and meaning. God becomes a kind of rational compulsion in Big Bang. Hence the postulation of a metaphysical principle, not merely a God of the gaps. Therefore, this argument would overlook the ontology of existence for an epistemic explanation. Even if the Big Bang theory is self-consistent as to explain every detail of the origin of the universe, does it rule out the scope for a metaphysical principle? Not quite, because even then there is no explanation for the ontology of our existence. Epistemically, the theory may be consistent scientifically, but the metaphysical explanation still remains incomplete. Okay, the ontology of existence and the epistemology of explanation, we need to be distinguishing between these 2 points. So that is why this famous argument from sufficient reason, whereby God is considered as the metaphysical first cause of the universe, does hold in Big Bang theory. This is an argument that is always raised against all sorts of atheistic argument from philosophy. What is that? God as the sufficient reason, the metaphysical first cause. What is that? Why is there something rather than nothing? Of course, as the atheists argue, we can concede that the universe, the origin of the universe can be explained without recourse to a metaphysical principle like God. Okay, we can explain the origin of the universe consistently in Big Bang without any recourse to a God as the originator. But still then, one point still remains open. What is that? Why should the universe go for the bother of existing? Why should there be universe at all? You are explaining in every minute detail as to how did the universe originate. Science has explained it, let us say, for argument's sake. But even then the question remains as to why is there something rather than nothing? Or why should the universe be existing at all? This is what we give in response to the first critique argument from the point of view of atheism. Steven Weinberg is an atheistic astronomer. What he says, something similar, not exact formulation here. The more we understand the universe, the more pointless it becomes, according to Stephen Weinberg, a renowned cosmologist. And George Cohen was the director of the Vatican Observatory, a renowned astronomer himself. He says, he has replied to this argument of Stephen Weinberg. What he says, the universe is pointless for those who have no point. That is to say, if only you reject reason and rationality, can you say that the universe appears to be pointless the more you understand it? Okay. Second argument from the atheistic point of view, time may be eternal. That is to say, it eliminates the originative initial conditions of the Big Bang. When you say Big Bang begin in 0 second, when t was equal to 0, unfortunately, they say your understanding of time is within the broader framework of our present understanding of time. But the original time, at the beginning of the time, may have been far different from our understanding of time today. Our experience of time may not have been the real time that has been there in the beginning. Say, for instance, Stephen Hawking's no boundary theory, which we'll soon pick up. There he speaks quite a lot about the imaginary time. Time existing in beginning in imaginary time, and then imaginary time eventually becoming real time. In that context, how will you say that the universe has a beginning in time? And we had discussed this point that some of the latest interpretations of the Big Bang theory says that the universe space-time may have existed even before Big Bang. Therefore, atheists argue the theory dependence of the beginning, that should be it. This is our response to this second point of the atheistic Big Bang interpretation. What is that? Even if time is eternal, there are boundary conditions in eternal time. Time could be eternal, no issue about that. But Big Bang still appear to be a boundary condition in an eternal time. Most astronomers do not negate a singularity, but was that singularity the beginning of time? That is contentious and debated. But even then, in this eternal time, boundary conditions are there. If boundary conditions are there, there could be an external agency that is responsible for these specific conditions of the boundary. Therefore, this argument also is not rationally convincing enough to give a self-consistent explanation for Big Bang, ruling out any metaphysical nuances. Thirdly, probability and chance. We have been arguing for the existence of God in terms of chance and probability. Okay, see, probability, they argue that probability rules the Big Bang. Critical parameters are chosen according to probability from infinite choices. A scientific theory must not contain any elements of metaphysics or mythology. That is what the arguments of the atheists are. Probability, chance. There are so many elements of probability and chance in quantum theory, which is one of the central theories of the modern cosmology also. And we argued for God's existence from fine-tuning original conditions and so on. Why should there be these critical parameters? If there were slight differences in the initial condition, in the critical density and other parameters, we humans would not have been here at all, we have been saying. That is fine. But could not these conditions have been merely resulting from probability or chance? There could have been infinite choices and probabilities, out of which just one probability has materialized. That is what our universe is. Then what is the need for a creator God? If that is the state of affairs, certainly this is a valid argument, is logical argument. What could be the response for that? we are not ruling out. Theists are not ruling out the role of chance or probability in Big Bang. The critical parameters could have been resulting from chance and probability, but it doesn't mean that the role of chance and probability is an indication that there is no God. Not quite. That cannot be the case, because there are theologians who argue that chance is the mechanism which God used for creation. Theory of evolution assumes a lot elements of chance. Does it imply that there is no God? No. Could not chance have been the mechanism that God used in evolution to cause the origination of multiple number of species? Could be. Okay, chance again. Chance means for the time being, we do not know the cause. Okay. Therefore, chance, what we consider as chance, need not necessarily be chance also. This is another way of responding to this critique. Okay. Therefore, it enhances the image of a benevolent God who shares his creative powers with creation. Einstein's mind of God, we had discussed in the last class. Did God have a choice? God should have had choices, many choices. And Big Bang critical parameters appearing so out of millions of chances is perfectly consistent with the freedom of God, the benevolence of God. Therefore, the chance playing an important role in Big Bang is no indication that there is no God. That point needs to be clear. And many have argued against chance also. See, firstly, we are positively appropriating chance and its importance in Big Bang rather than negating the role of chance. Acknowledging the role of chance, we argue for God's existence. The second stream of response is that chance need not necessarily be chance, which means for the time being, we do not know the cause. That is all. Again, the third stream of argument against chance is that chance is not rationally convincing enough. This beautiful, elegant, mysterious universe originating out of mere accidental coincidences that appears absolutely rational. That is the argument. Okay. Suppose in the city of New York, a tornado or hurricane occurs. It takes the entire garbage in the city of New York to the Atlantic Ocean. And see, after 1 hour, you see the entire garbage turning out to be a beautiful cruise ship. How did the cruise ship originate? Pure chance, we say. Does it sound sensible and rational? Not quite. This is how we say that accidental factors, probabilities, and chances have evolved itself into this elegant universe. It doesn't appear to be so. And there is another mathematical argument against chance. I think we have already referred to that. You must be familiar with that already. Suppose you select 1,000 monkeys and give them a typewriter each and ask them to compose something, anything as they wish by typing on the typewriter keys. And these 1,000 monkeys to compose at least one stanza of one of Shakespeare's sonnets, the 14 billion years of, the 4 billion years of the history of life is not enough just to produce one stanza of Shakespeare's sonnets by chance by these 1,000 monkeys. Time is not yet enough, it seems. This so much inadequate is chance as an explanatory mechanism to explain the mysteries of the universe or the mysteries of life. Then fine-tuning as wishful thinking. Probably next Friday, we will have a detailed discussion on the cosmic fine-tuning or cosmic coincidences and intelligent design. Again, more in favor of the existence of God from Big Bang. And even Richard Dawkins himself had made this statement that among the various arguments for God's existence, what is confusing to him, what is most challenging to him is the fine-tuning argument, it seems. It is good to dwell in detail on this fine-tuning. Therefore, I will be inviting another scholar to introduce this fine-tuning issues to you, taking a number of examples from contemporary cosmology. What Peter William Atkins in Oxford, what he says, this fine-tuning argument as proof for God's existence is merely a wishful thinking. Absence of evidence leads to sentimental wishful thinking. We do not find the adequate evidence for an external creator. Therefore, we impose our wishful thinking on the original event. This is nothing more than our desire to have a creator, not really existing. Okay. Therefore, again, it also implies, fine-tuning also implies an extension of our false analogies. What is that? An instead, we have cell with us, mobile phones. That is for speaking and many other purposes. We have a computer here. A spoon and fork is there on our table. These things have immediate purposes. Okay, they are ordinary objects because these sort of objects are associated, commonly associated, ordinary objects are associated with certain purpose, do not imply that the cosmos at large should have a purpose. Their argument, you can value the merit and strength of this argument. Okay, he says that this could be wishful thinking. The universe has evolved over its 14 billion years of current existence by directionless, unguided processes that are manifestations of the working out of physical laws. And you say if the universe had a purpose, why did it take so many years, 14 billion years, to produce humans at all? Does it suggest about the incapacity of the universe, infertility of the cosmos to produce anything meaningful? Okay, this is their point of argument. So the limit of understanding cannot suggest the existence of anything supernatural. What could be our response to this argument? See, basically, as we already saw in our discussion, it implies a bit of negation of reasoning itself, our common sense itself. The ordinary objects associated with it is from the experiential, from the observable, that we move on to the speculative, logical, rational conclusions. It all begins with perception. Then we go on to abstractions. That is the rational method. That is a scientific method. If this author is negating the validity of our observations and ordinary experiences, that is self-defeating the very rational methodology and the fidelity of this very scientific enterprise. There can be no laws of nature. There can be no rational laws for science. If we think our rational conclusions to be wishful thinking, natural physical laws, again, what we consider as the physical laws, can we consider them? In fact, what we need altogether, I am presenting to you a completely different image of God. God as the self of self-consistency. Scientists are arguing that the universe's Big Bang is self-consistent without reference to a God. Could we argue, granted that somebody is requesting me to record this meeting, fine, but this is already being recorded. All this recorded material will be shared with you. Therefore, the individual participants need not be bothered about recording it. Okay, all records are uploaded on our classroom, so you are most welcome to make use of that. Okay, God is the self of self-consistency. I am presenting another image of God here. can say the Eastern models of God, the mystical images of God. Most of these atheistic arguments are founded on the Greek, Western, rationalistic construction of God from the argument, from the logical principles of identity, non-contradiction, causality, and so on. There are also other epistemologies which none of these atheistic authors are least familiar with. The effluent images of God, the pantheistic images of God, God as the self of the self-consistency of the universe, the Tao of the Taoists. The Chinese have no idea of a creator God, but they consider the entire creation to be the sheer re-expression of the metaphysical reality of Tao. Without postulating a creator God, they have postulated a metaphysical element in the universe, the Tao. There are such epistemologies also. So these alternative theologies also we need to be considering while assessing, while responding to the atheists. Most atheistic arguments from the Western philosophy is based on the Western rationalistic epistemology. Okay. There are images of God beyond the models of causality. This point also I wish to bring to your attention. Next argument from the atheist. This is from Christian Duve, biochemist. Okay. Gospel of contingency. Life and mind are such extraordinary manifestations of matter. Many universes unable to give rise to them exist or are possible. There is no logical need for a creator in this view. By definition, a creator must himself be uncreated. Why not have the universe itself uncreated? An actual manifestation of ultimate reality rather than the work of an uncreated creator. Okay. So, two elements to this argument. Life and the universe are extraordinary. Life and matter, mind are manifestations of matter. This is another area. And many universes unable to give rise to this exist. That is fine. There are several, as far as we know, life exists only on this earth, in our galaxy. Of course, we will have another session in astrobiology. Later, we will explore the possibilities of these things later on. But as far as the present day science is concerned, we know of the existence of life only here on Earth. It means there is a God who is not capable of producing life elsewhere. It is inconsistent with an omnipotent, benevolent God. The universe could have been eternal, uncreated. This point we have already explained. Even if it is eternal and uncreated, it implies boundary conditions. Okay. Eternal universe is theologically possible. We have already seen that point. Tenable with the creator philosophy of the Chinese. Does it imply something in the line of an ontological ultimate, as has been envisaged in the process philosophy, Whitehead and companions? So again, alternative models of God in response to the image of God that these atheists are rejecting from cosmology. Lawrence Krauss relativized the role of the humans. Humans are insignificant in creation. Cosmos suggests that we do not play a central role in it. We are, as a planet, cosmically insignificant. Life on Earth will end, as it has probably done on countless planets in the past and will do in the future. Nature seems as uncaring as it is unyielding. Thus, organized religions which put humanity at the center of some divine plan seem to assault our dignity and intelligence. Of course, the point here is not exactly cosmological, rather, the larger cosmological knowledge challenges our anthropocentric theology and thereby theocentric understanding of humans and cosmos. This is the point with Lawrence Krauss. Of course, this is one important contribution that contemporary cosmology has made, that it has relativized the role of humans. If universe is 13.76 billion years old, but modern humans are just 200,000 years old. If we reduce the entire history of the universe to a 24-hour time scale, we humans appear just 3 seconds earlier. In the 23rd hour, 59th second minute, 58th second only we are born. We humans are just 3 seconds old in the history of the universe, provided on estimated on a 24-hour time scale. So young are we. Then what is the superiority that is attributed to humans? Of course, for the argument's sake, let us grant that we humans are very, very insignificant and nominal, although there are several philosophies and theologies challenging this idea. It doesn't mean that universe is insignificant. New theological anthropology, what it says is that the anthropic principle we saw in the fine-tuning, the very Big Bang assumed the preparation, birth of at this phase of time. Our roots are in the Big Bang. Human existence is a cosmical and the universal presence and participation in reality, we could say. Human existence is a cosmic presence. Our roots, our birthdays are the birthday of the birthday of the universe itself. Such a wider cosmic understanding of human being is there now. And as much as our cosmology has advanced and developed, our anthropology also has equally expanded, especially in the contemporary times, the eco-philosophical and eco-theological thinking, very much broadening our ecological and cosmological embeddedness with the entire creation. Therefore, we have nothing to object to the argument of the atheists in this regard, except that it eliminates the scope for a metaphysical principle. Okay, these are some of the prominent atheistic cosmologists and physicists. There are many others whom we have to argue for. And of course, David Hume's argument against the intelligent design or the first cause, or Thomas Aquinas' 5 ways for proving God's existence, that needs special attention. We will have other sessions on big atheism also in our special and advanced questions, the final course. That discussion I am reserving for that course. David Hume and the arguments for negation of God's existence. For the time being, I am setting aside Hume here, although there are several other authors who need serious attention here. I wish to invite your attention to another prominent atheistic interpretation of contemporary cosmology by the renowned physicist, mathematician, and scientist Stephen Hawking. Very popular scientist. Of course, he has not received a Nobel Prize, and many are apprehensive about his scientific credentials since he did not make original contribution. As such, he did not get a Nobel Prize. There are many accusing way playing down on Hawking. But I think that is not true. Hawking really has made significant contributions to cosmology and physics. And he has influenced the horizons of meaning of millions of people. And Hawking's atheism is related to his cosmology. His cosmological atheism is presented in 2 of his bestsellers, A Brief History of Time and The Grand Design. Brief History was published in the 1980s. It was a bestseller at that time. Millions of copies of this book were sold world over. It was very fashionable to have a copy of the Brief History of Time on your table if you are an educated person. This might appear to be very simple, but it is deceptively simple. Many people who bought this book did not read it, and many who read it did not understand the arguments of this book. It is reviewed about. And his grand design, published of late, and there also he is continuing with his argument for the non-existence of God from cosmology. So I would like to introduce Hawking's theory, scientific theory in which he is developing his atheistic cosmology. Hawking theory is firstly, let us discuss brief history of time. Hawking's brief history of time, the central argument is that the universe has no boundary. Why it does not have a boundary? Because space-time has no beginning. If space-time has no beginning, we do not require a creator God. Because the universe is eternal. There is no beginning to the universe. If the universe had a beginning, we could say there is a creator. If it is beginningless, the universe is creatorless. That is how that citation goes, no? How did he? So long as the universe had a beginning, we could propose it had a creator. But if the universe is really completely self-contained, having no boundary or edge, it would have neither beginning nor end. It would simply be. What place then for a creator? This is from his bestseller, Brief History of Time. And the preface to this book was written by Carl Sagan, the popular science writer and television speaker, no? His Cosmos series on the American television channels were very popular. A prominent atheist from sciences. Okay. This is, in fact, Carl Sagan's preface to that book is said to have made this book popular, rather than the scientific theory that Hawking is advocating. In that preface, Sagan is saying, this is also a book about God, about the non-existence of God. The word God fills each page of this book. Of course, Hawking takes recourse to God several times. That is what makes Sagan to say that this is a book about the non-existence of God, and the word God fills each page of this book. And let us say, what is the merit of this theory? Hawking's theory is called the no boundary theory. No boundary for space and no boundary for universe. Why is there no boundary? Because space-time has no boundary. As such, there is no singularity. As such, there is no creator. This is what Hawking does basically. He is envisaging a scenario where relativity theory and quantum theory are merged together. This is an ambitious project of the scientist, not yet successful. This is only hypothetical theory yet. But Hawking is imagining such a scenario again. Hawking is assuming mainly the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics. But for many leading theoretical physicists, many worlds interpretation is not credible enough. But Hawking is using that. Again, Hawking is postulating imaginary time. The origin of the universe takes place in imaginary time. But later on, he will say, imaginary time itself is the real time. This is a confusion about Hawking. So, as that picture says, he compares the origin of the universe to the the shape of the earth. Just as a circle has neither a beginning nor an end, universe has no beginning and end. He is imagining a mathematical scenario where the universe could be originating in a situation where the space-time has no beginning or boundary. But mathematically it works. That is what commentators are telling us about his theory. This is a mathematical trick that Hawking plays, it seems. But that trick works very well. Mathematically, that is consistent, but not grounded in mathematical truthfulness and authentic scientific theories. But as a trick, it works, it seems. Okay. Okay. So I will add some of the reflections by our professor and guide, Dr. Job Collindam. These slides were prepared by Job, what we are going to discuss next. I thought this is very helpful for us also. This is what we find now in 1988, and so long as this statement I already made, and grand design, what is that? Because there is a law like gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. Spontaneous creation is the reason there is something rather than this point we will pick up soon. This is Hawking's argument against God in no boundary theory. This is his strategy. Use the latest development in contemporary science to show the dispensability of God in creation of the universe. And this is his methodology. He blends the general relativity of theory and quantum theory. In 1983, Hawking and Hartle sets up the wave function of the universe and the equation governing it. Okay. On solving the equation, they were able to get a model of the universe, which through a though four-dimensional was analogous to the surface of a three-dimensional sphere. A sphere has neither a starting point or an end point. Our universe also has no starting point, moment of creation, or end point, moment of the end of the universe. There is neither creation nor end. Therefore, there is no need for a creator. This is Hawking's argument. This is how, of course, I already highlighted you some of the limitations of the scientific theories that he is basing himself. Some advantages, first and say, God and religion taken seriously by Hawking. Secondly, he makes an attempt to present a self-contained universe on scientific grounds. Although it is inconsistent, he makes an attempt, a commendable attempt, we could say. According to Hawking, the no-boundary theory presents a completely self-contained universe and did not require boundary conditions. The first attempt to show the dispensability of God on scientific basis. Of course, philosophers have argued from any point of view, but something of a scientifically sensible, an argument having a scientific nature was first and foremost put forth by Hawking, we could say. These are the drawbacks. The theory cannot give a definite answer. Absence of detailed predictions from the theory to test it, it's satisfactory against observations. If the no-boundary theory should have been self-consistent, so should have been making predictions. But nowadays, it is to date, this theory has made no predictions. This is the failed theory. Hence, nowadays, nobody takes Hawking's no-boundary theory anything seriously. But as for science religion scholars like us, we need to be familiar with this theory and its strength and weaknesses, because Hawking is still very popular among the popular folk, though not much in the reputed academic and philosophical circles. Okay. The theory is not really boundary free because he presupposes several scientific conditions. Such and such, if only such and such conditions are met, can there be a no boundary state of affairs. In order to eliminate a singularity, Hawking sets up several conditions. Say, imaginary time should have, many words interpretation should have, four-dimensional spatio-temporal state of affairs should be envisaged. All these are conditions. Therefore, he is confusing between the questions of how with the question of who or why in no boundary theory. Okay. Again, many questions remain unanswered. Why is there a universe at all? This point we already discussed at the beginning of our session today. Why is there something rather than nothing? he seems to equate self-contained with the self-made universe. This is the confusion that Hawking has failed to distinguish between. Self-contained universe is not equal to self-made universe. Cannot God make a self-contained universe? God made the universe and made it self-contained. Hawking's theory is perfectly consistent with such a view. I would personally say Hawking's theory is rich with the theological overtones. Provided we are appropriating Hawking from the Eastern epistemological perspectives now, that it enhances theology very much, as opposed to God as the uncaused cause or unmoved mover, an indwelling idea of God. The creation itself was effluent from God. God as indwelling in creation. God as the self of the self-consistency of the universe. The organic metaphors coined in the Eastern worldviews, in the Taoist, Hindu, Buddhist worldviews. Okay, very enriching in that regard. Unfortunately, Hawking was not familiar with anything of the Eastern philosophies or religious theologies. One of my friend, an astronomer scientist from Kerala, he met Hawking in Cambridge and gifted him Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is the sacred scripture of the Hindus. And he told Hawking that in Gita there is the idea of an eternal universe, the cyclic model of creation and destruction, the unending universe, something that is coming close to your view and so on. Hawking did not respond much. He just received the gift, that is all, and placed it in his shelf, it seems. I don't think Hawking has studied Gita, anything of that sort. Anyway, this scientist found such sort of a creative reconciliation between Hawking's no boundary theory and the Hindu worldview altogether. Okay, that's what Don Pace say. It is one thing that a circle has no specific starting point or end point, but who has drawn it that way is another question. Hawking fails to make this distinction. This is what scholars would say. So, atheistic philosopher Quentin Smith, he has been the president of the International Atheistic Society when he made this statement. After studying Hawking's no boundary theory, this philosopher is saying, this is probably the worst atheistic argument in the history of the Western thought, and I shall not waste the reader's time refuting it. The atheistic philosopher himself is saying that this does not meet the requirements of a logical or rationally consistent philosophical argument for the non-existence of God from cosmology. William Lane Craig, a couple of times I have introduced him to you. One of the most best debaters in the world and prominent Christian apologist. He is saying he has studied Hawking thoroughly and published his paper in the British Journal for the Philosophy of Science, I think. This is his conclusion. Hawking is doing metaphysics. When he begins to speculate about the nature of space and time and to claim that he has eliminated the need for a creator, it forces us and Hawking to confront squarely a different question. What price then for no creator? This is a retortion to Hawking's coinage of what place then for a creator? Craig's retortion, what price then for no creator? Okay, something is there in the chat. Let us see. How is it possible to claim that the universe can and will create itself from nothing due to the laws of physics, particularly gravity? This challenges traditional notions of a creator or divine intervention. Yes, Christopher, thank you for this question. You are anticipating the discussion of Hawking on in grand design. That is what we are going to do right now. We will. This is the argument that Christopher has made therein is Hawking's argument that he is putting forth in his second bestseller, The Grand Design. Okay. Please see if something or some response is made for given to your question. If not, please raise that point again here. We can deliberate over that form. Okay. The Grand Design of 2010 by Hawking and Leonard Mordau. We must appreciate Hawking's partial obsession with the mysteries of existence. Hawking made this prediction, made this statement that philosophy is a dead-end street. Philosophy is now dead because science is now dealing with all perennial questions of life and existence regarding the origin of the universe and so on. Philosophy has no role to play now as regards the ultimate questions are concerned. This is a naive and superficial question statement. But we must appreciate Hawking's project that rarely what scientists are inclined to do, Hawking is trying to do. He was seeking meaning throughout his life. He wanted to know the origin. He wanted to know the ends. That is why he came up with the scientific explanations. Although not intellectually gratifying and rationally tenable. This project we need to be appreciated. Question like the origin of the universe, humans' place in the universe. Why are we here? These are the questions that he wishes to answer. Why and how did creation out of nothing take place? Why is there something rather than nothing? This is an important question, postulated in defense of God. Hawking also is asking this question. Why is there something rather than nothing? Can we explain the why of the universe without a go? Can we explain why does the universe go for the bother of existing instead of being into absolute nothingness? The mysterious nature of reality, the mystery of this strikingly fine-tuned universe, all these things he is taking up for discussion. And he comes to the conclusion, because there is a law like gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. Spontaneous creation is the reason there is something rather than nothing. It is not necessary to invoke God. You must be curious to know why is there something rather than nothing. This is the answer that Hawking gives. This is said to be the original. He claims this to be the original contribution that he makes. What is that? Spontaneous creation is the reason there is something rather than nothing. Okay, take it for granted. Now we can see the limitations of tools used to get this radical conclusion. Why does he make this such a theory, such a claim? This is again based on another grand unification, what is called the M theory. Please recollect what I introduced you to in our discussion on physics and quantum mechanics, the particle physics, the modern scientific quest for grand unification. Hawking had predicted the end of physics by the year 1980. Saying that we will have developed a theory of everything by 1980. The unification of the four fundamental forces of nature. The gravitational force, electromagnetic force, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force. If these four fundamental forces are combined into one single force, That is the grand unification. A theory of everything, an M theory, F theory, mother theory, father theory. Once that theory is developed, we can finish off physics, it seems, because all questions are answered. But physics did not end in 1980. He extended the deadline to 2000. Things became only more and more complicated. Physics only got itself more and more revolutionized and radicalized, mysterified to some extent, we could say, as it advanced further and further. That's why I said Hawking was not philosophically anything adequately informed. Naive understanding of philosophy only he had, basically. So Hawking is envisaging a mother theory, an M theory, combining. But what is the state of affairs with this theory now? Understand, this is an 11-dimensional theory, something like a string theory, which he himself developed, containing one-dimensional vibrating strings and particles, two-dimensional membranes, three-dimensional blobs, and multi-dimensional objects called fibrates. You may note that it is important to note that it is on the basis of such a half-baked and still controversial theory that Hawking conclude that it is not necessary to invoke God to light the blue touch paper and set the universe going. Although Hawking claims his theory to be scientific, we say there is nothing in the scientific theories today that justifies Hawking's claim. His theories are hypothetical and speculative. So his envisaged M theory does not explain as to how something is originating spontaneously. Spontaneous creation adds nothing to the answer. Why is there something rather than nothing? This becomes only a circular argument, answering nothing, adding nothing new, only tautological in nature. This is the logical limit with this argument. I hope we have also answered the question of Christopher here. Why can't something be emerging out of nothing? Spontaneous creation. No scenario, ex nihilo nihil fitum. Nothing comes out of nothing. That is what rationality implies. Democritus dictum, nothing comes out of nothing. And science has not envisaged a state of affairs where anything spontaneously emerging out of nothing. Okay. Some positive aspects of the grand design, widening the scope of science to deal with traditionally non-scientific but very important questions, the big questions. Creative use of the latest scientific theories and data to show the untenability of certain central tenets of religion. Taking a truly professional and dispassionate approach towards religious matters. Hawking says that I am not rebuking or rebutting anybody's belief in life after death or not. I don't find any justification for believing in life after death or in God. But I am nobody to condemn others' belief also. That is what his statement is. So we said this is a professional and dispassionate approach to matters religious. Negative aspect or the limitations of his argument, philosophical argument. He is using several concepts like God, but his God is merely a watchmaker God of the mechanical philosophy of nature. He is coining nothing and nothingness. In effect, he himself is not clear as to what this nothingness is. Creation out of nothing. And that he says as the energy of confinement being converted into matter. What does it mean basically? Out of nothing. It does not explain anything. Boundary condition, all these are vague and confusing terms that he is using in his theory. unjustifiable attempt to treat self-operational with the self-made or self-contained. This point we already made in the previous section. Weak philosophical sensitivity. It is interesting to note that Hawking and most other atheistic agnostic scholars show very strict scientific sensitivity. Example, quantifying exactly with utmost care. But when it comes to matters philosophical and religious, they seem to be shabby and careless. Of course, this is understandable given their poor background in interdisciplinary discussions with philosophy and theology of their science. Hawking also tended to overestimate science significantly. He appears to be a bit confusing in that regard. The boom of science is the doom of God and religion. Is it so? Before we understand science, it is natural to believe that God created the universe. This was a pre-scientific view. In our scientific world, God and religion superfluous. Hawking. The whole history of science has been the gradual realization that events do not happen in an arbitrary manner, but that they reflect a certain underlying order which may or may not be divinely inspired. Science as omniscient for Hawking. I believe there are no questions that science cannot answer about a physical universe. With megalomaniac, far-fetched from reality, these claims in a way reminds of the scientism of the early 20th century. Even love, joy, beauty can be covered under the purview of science. Some people would claim that things like love, joy, and beauty belong to a different category from science and cannot be described in scientific terms. But I think they can now be explained by the theory of evolution. The goal of his lifelong engagement in science. My goal is simple. It is a complete understanding of the universe. Why is it as it is and why it exists at all? In fact, this vision I would also share with Hawking very much. I wish if Hawking were able to give us such a consistent explanation of his goal. We can share his goal, his dream, but not his explanation. That is, we want to know, but nobody has given us anything without reference to a metaphysical principle, rationally convinced. Science also has limits. Here, the usual approach of science, constructing a mathematical model, cannot answer the questions of why there should be a universe for the model to describe. Why does the universe go to all the bother of existing? I hope I have helped to raise the profile of science and to show that physics is not a mystery, but can be understood by ordinary people. Some conclusions that we can draw from his end. M theory, no boundary theory, scientific understanding of nothingness, spontaneous creation, self-operating versus self-made. These are confusing state of affairs in his theory. Insoluble philosophical issues. It is possible some of the controversial scientific theories may go away with the development of science in the future. Some of the issues are deeply philosophical. There does not seem to be much sense of these philosophical challenges going away. So, with regard to Hawking, we must conclude that Hawking has not eliminated the scope of philosophy with his no boundary theory or his philosophical scientific speculations in grand design. Why is there something rather than nothing? That question still remains all the more imposing. Spontaneous creation explains practically nothing. Scientifically not tenable. So all perennial questions with regard to the origin, meaning, destiny of the universe still remain open. Okay, this is the conclusion that we can speak about Hawking's atheism. Now, before we conclude, let us have a quick recap of all, quick response to atheism in general from the various atheistic arguments we discussed from the cosmological point of view. Firstly, there are serious methodological issues involved in arguing for atheism from sciences. Reductionist scientism, the tendency is to reduce everything to mere empirical experimental methodologies, extreme reductionism. Then unwarranted mix-up of science, philosophy, and theology. These are their subjective worldviews which are not justified or not consistent with the science that they are advocating. There is an unwarranted mix-up of science, philosophy, and theology in their positions. Science becomes a belief system for many of these authors. Religion is very much a faith, belief system. Ultra-Darwinism or cosmological atheism, this is another scientific religion, we could say. Atheistic religion. Atheism becomes a sort of religion here, based on dubious, untestable, unjustified scientific assumptions, based on mere gratuitous assumptions from personal preferences. No better than creationists. Creationism, that old, outdated, literal understanding of scripture. The fundamentalist denominations advocating theology. Theology advocated by them. So this is the counterpart of creationism, we could say. Then epistemological issues. This point I already explained. Dualistic epistemology of the Greek philosophy. Western dualistic epistemology. There are alternate epistemic paradigms, conceptual models, which if weighed against these atheistic philosophies and sciences, will lose their tenability altogether. Causality and design arguments, of course. Well, Chinese philosophy, for instance, Taoism. I think I already referred to you this citation. Man follows the laws of nature. Nature follows, what is that? Man follows the laws of nature. Nature follows the laws of Tao. And Tao follows the laws of its own intrinsic nature. This is a statement from Tao Te Chi, the scripture of Taoism. Okay, therefore, what is the point? There is a metaphysical principle that needs to be postulated for the explanation of the cosmos, which is the ground of the entire creation. The material universe, the physical cosmos, is the decoding of the laws of the metaphysical principle of Tao. It is not an external agency. It is not an external creator. The world is Tao itself, but it's not an external creator. The world, Tao turns out to be creation. The laws of Tao is laying down the laws of nature. And cosmological atheists are least have anybody, I don't think anybody has tried to address this sort of alternative worldviews in arguing for God or atheism from Big Bang. New models of creation, like God as the ground of being, process theological images of God, creatio continuans, pantheism, the contemporary reinterpretation of pantheism. Pantheism says that everything is God. But nowadays, theologians have revised this position and they are introduced this new concept called panentheism. That is to say, everything is in God. That is again, finally, the metaphysical issue, the principle of sufficient reason. Why is there something rather than nothing? Even if everything is explained scientifically so consistently, the final question still remains, why is there something rather than nothing? So these are our concluding remarks. Big Bang atheism may be theologically more enriching than the traditional dogmatic theological assumptions. This is my own endorsement. When I reflect over this assumption, this is what I am inclined to think. What these atheists are advocating, if their arguments are weighed against the alternative epistemologies and alternative conceptual worldviews, rich theology can be built up. This is the challenge of us science religion theories altogether. God is not a God of the gaps. It is in knowledge and meaning, not in ignorance and the gaps that we should encounter God. Some days.
Hiyo mambo ya bira hiyo wachana naye.
Okay. Secondly, God is encountered not in the unknown, but in the knowledge. God is encountered in knowledge and not in the ignorance. And book of nature and the book of scripture. That is from Johannes Kepler. In the history of science religion interaction course we had, Job had introduced you to that. In as much as the scripture is the disclosure of the divine, Kepler claims that nature also discloses the divine. This is another scripture written by God, and science is helping us to read that scripture. I am the priest of the book of nature. Kepler has been making this statement. Granted that the universe has no purpose, can there be relevance for God? Is another question that I am just throwing to you, just to provoke your reflections. Say the universe has no purpose, no creator. Can there be relevance for God? Kierkegaard perhaps will answer that. He says God does not exist. Rather, he creates, he ever creates. God is not creating universe in the beginning. God is ongoing, unceasing, upward, onward, nude, act of creation every moment. God is creation. God creates, not that he just exists somewhere else outside the universe. A beautiful metaphor, I would say. So therefore, the primacy of faith in rationality. I would want the scientist, atheistic scientist, to be very strong, to come up with strong arguments for the negation of God. That will help us advance our image of God. That will help theologians to advance the theological narratives of God. As of now, scientific rationality is not sound enough to challenge theology adequately. I would wish that scientists come up with stronger arguments for the negation of God. Then science, religion, theorists and theologians have a better homework to do, I would say. Therefore, it is equally challenging as well as equally rewarding to have a meaningful dialogue with atheism in science religion dialogue. So, real intellectual interdisciplinary brilliance and scholarship can easily and quite comfortably interact with any scientific theory, atheistic scientific theory, that may seemingly appear to sit awkwardly with religion and theology. So creative intelligence can easily confront any scientific atheistic argument, how far science may advance. That is the position we would take, and that is what the objective of our program also, to equip you also to engage yourself meaningfully in dialogue with scientific atheism as well. Of course, friends, with these remarks, I am concluding this discussion. I do not find any questions in the chat box, but if you have any questions, please post them to me now. You can unmute yourself and ask questions or put your questions in the chat box. Yeah, this is a sort of special kind of, it's a bit specialized discussion that we had today. We have gone in some depth. Of course, I have not covered all the topic. And there are several other aspects of atheism also we have got to address. Something we will pick up in the next course, Life Sciences, Richard Dawkins and his atheism and so on. And in the special questions, also more atheistic arguments will be placed before you. And however, I thought it is good to do this in this cosmological atheism in this course on physics and cosmology itself, especially since our focus was mostly on origin of the cosmos and Big Bang. Okay, does anybody like to make any comment? I would be happy to respond to you.
Father Augustine?
Yes, Professor Jerry.
To what extent do you believe that ethics, going back to Immanuel Kant, the idea that he felt that the existence of God was necessary for ethics, do you think you're going to have an ethical system based purely on an atheistic understanding of the universe?
Could you speak a little louder, Professor?
Do you believe Immanuel Kant said that in order to have an ethical system based upon reliable ethical principles that are imperative, that create an imperative for ethical behavior, you need the existence of God. To what extent is ethics dependent upon, can you have an ethical system purely on an atheistic understanding of the universe?
Yeah, very good, very good. Professor, what I understand about the Kantian postulation of God for morality and ethics, that is based on his categorical imperative. Of course. See, this is the argument basically. Two things are so bewildering to me. The starry heavens above and the moral law within me. These are the two objects that is making me marvelous, wonder about. And you very well contrasted between the moral law and the mystery of the universe. See, this question was asked to Dawkins himself in one of the interviews. I don't know who interviewed. Mr. Dawkins, will rape be justified in a country where rape is legal? Okay, suppose raping children is permitted by law in a country. Will that be morally sensible, morally justified? We know it will not be. That is to say, there is a categorical imperative within us. There is a moral law within us which says that there are certain conditions which are undisputedly moral. Certain principles that are to be undisputedly be considered metaphysically moral within us. Hence the postulation of God for Kantian morality. Similarly, of course, I think this analogy we can draw to cosmological lines also. The moral argument for God's existence are mainly founded on Kantian argument, we know. And that is to say, there are some irrefutable, indispensable moral consciousness within us, the origin of which can be only from something beyond us. And that reality beyond us can be postulated as God. The moral law within us. The first and foremost object that is making me, that is evoking that sense of wonder and awe within. Secondly, the second part of your question, can we apply this analogy to cosmos also? Professor, I would say what we have been discussing in the previous class, especially about fine-tuning, cosmic analogies and so on, despite the existence of evil and disorder in the cosmos, the universe is so beautiful. Universe imposes itself to be purposive, it does carry a meaning. As George Coyne said in retortion to Stephen Weinberg, the more we understand the cosmos, the more it appears to be pointless, Weinberg said, but only for those who have no point. The universe is so enchanted now. Therefore, the idea of the starry heavens that Kant spoke about also can be is more justified in the Kantian cosmological wonder also is only more justified in the context of the contemporary cosmology. I am inclined to think, Professor. If you have to add something further, please do that.
I would add this, Father Augustine, that when you reject the existence of God, you tend to make yourself a God.
Okay.
When you reject the existence of God, the tendency historically has been to make oneself God. So self-aggrandizement and making oneself the center of the universe is the opposite of accepting a transcendent God.
Very good. Thanks for that comment. If we reject the metaphysical God, one will be inclined to perhaps replace another doctrine, another principle, another supreme entity in place of that. That is what rationality warrants. That was the temptation of the scientism. I think your reflection is along with the conclusion that I made, that this science is tending to be another belief system here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in politics, we're seeing that authoritarianism goes with making yourself like a god. You see that in the world today.
Very good. Yeah. More than rationality, this is authoritarianism that is playing in scientific atheism. True. I would agree with you.
Yeah. Thank you.
In the chat, I find, I think, the two comments.
So there are two arguments here. The first one is that, of course, as human beings, we want to relate God to us. So we want a God we can explain, mention, touch, discuss. But if you look in other traditions, this supreme being is too powerful even to describe. So some say he's everything of everything. So even if you try to quantify, it becomes difficult. So then your statement, you're talking about God does not exist, but God is ongoing. Is everything that is ongoing. I find that very interesting. Then the second one, the second point, is what I put in the chat, is the theory of comparative habitability. So what you have explained could also imply that life continues and continues in beyond the memory. So it means that perhaps there was life on other planets like Venus, maybe, and then with the time, maybe climate change, everything died. Then life is on Earth. It's possible that give it another maybe a billion years to come, it will die. Then there'll be life moves to Mars, like now we are planning to live on Mars. I think there's even a request, once you move to Mars, you never return. You go there and live there forever. There are people in America who have already booked their space on Mars. Maybe another generation will come that will live on Mars, but the Earth will disappear. Would you perhaps believe in that comparative habitability theories perpetuated by Harvard School?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Reginald, for those additional comments. They are very much complimentary. That will certainly provoke further reflections, I think. And something of this, the final reflection you made about life, we will pick up in this course itself when we deal with astrotheology and astrobiology together. Then you can make more contributions, I think. Anyway, thank you for your comments. To what extent are assertions of by Hawking considered scientific, or are they arguments against theological assertions? From Sheet Wang? Yeah, Wangira, I am sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly. The assertions of Hawking are claimed to be scientific. There is a lot of science in that. In no boundary theory, there is the confluence of relativity theory and quantum theory. Many words interpretation of quantum mechanics is there. Postulation of imaginary time is there. All these things are scientifically founded. Unlike the philosophical speculation, there is a plethora of science backing is there for Hawking's theory. But those claimed scientific theories are more or less at the hypothetical or speculative level. That is why Job Gordon used the term half-baked science. Grand design, its argument. Why is there something rather than nothing? Spontaneous creation. Reason, argument, grand unified theories. But grand unified theories are far from being realized. Some are arguing that this completely at mistaken trajectory at all itself. Anyway, therefore, the scientific strength of Hawking's arguments is a matter of contention and debate. Okay, and what the merit about Hawking is that he has used scientific assumptions to reject the theological assertions for God's existence, despite its loopholes. Okay. Professor Reginald, you have made that detailed comment there by him. Comparative habitability of the Earth, Venus, and Mars in the young solar system. Abstract to habitable, a planet must be suitable at all scales. The setting in relation to the star must be right so that surface temperature, the planetary inventory must be suitable, providing Professor Reginald, this is exactly the point that we are going to deal with fine-tuning next week by Dr. Joseph Matthew. He is a renowned author and scientist in this field itself. You have very well highlighted 3-4 examples of the conditions of life to emerge anywhere. All these conditions that you are laying down are they're based on the model that we have on Earth. How did life originate on Earth? And those conditions we are applying to other planets also. And that is what is governing our research in the search for Earth-like planets. If life is there elsewhere, those planets will be Earth-like. That is the condition. So what are the conditions that led to the origin of life on our planet? And we are expecting those conditions on those planets also. That is a matter of fine-tuning and exobiology or astrobiology. We will deal with that in detail soon. Anyway, thanks for bringing this, anticipating that discussion, Professor Reginald. Bye for everybody. God bless.